Good afternoon, everyone from Kaunas, the future European Capital of Culture 2022. We are starting the live broadcast of our session under the title Design Tribune, about design from different angles, inclusion, communities, processes. My name is Rita. I'm curator of design program at Kaunas 2022, and I will be moderating today's session. The session is an integral part of the first Kaunas design event happening now and already for several days in Kaunas, that is dedicated to the present and the future of urban and design issues, and includes creative workshops, lectures, live broadcasts, exhibition, and public space activations. Today we focus on different perspectives to think and act design. So I'm really happy to introduce you the panelists of today's session: Rama Gheerawo from UK, Maxime from France, and Rita Orlando from Italy. Hello, everyone, and so good to have you, all of you with us. To be honest, we were quite selfish to invite you to share with us your ideas and best practices. You know, Kaunas, as UNESCO City of Design, looks for new ways to recreate and form its contemporary identity. We assume that three main directions might be essential to our city, that is design heritage, accessibility, sustainability, and innovation. So we pose question how these fields can actually correlate and what new possibilities that might provoke. So thank you once again for joining us today and sharing your insights. Before we start our presentations, just the short technical information. I would like to inform everyone who has joined our session online to invite to react and leave your questions here in comment area. We'll have the short Q&A session that will follow after each presentation and after all three presentations. And now let me present our keynote speaker, Rama Chiaravo, the director of Helen Hamlin Center for Design, Royal College of Art, London. He's an international and inspirational figure within design. Rama is a serial innovator in the field of inclusive design, design thinking, and creative leadership, having personally led over 100 projects working internationally with governments, business, academia, and the third sector. He won a Hall of Fame award for his work at the Design Week Awards in 2019 and was named a 2018 Creative Leaders by Creative Review. Empathy is at the heart of his practice. He's a high demand as a keynote speaker and writes, curates exhibitions, and runs workshops. Rama sits on a number of advisory boards and committees of awards, universities, and organizations, such as UK Design Council, the International Association for Universal Design, UX India, and Design Management Institute, as well as Design Intelligence Awards. Rama, we are extremely excited to have you and to hear your presentation under the title, Human First, Designers Second. So Rama, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all, though the only challenge is I'm not physically there with you, but emotionally, I very much feel I'm there. I hope everyone can see my slides. So I'll spend the next sort of 45 minutes talking you through inclusive design. The talk is called Human First, Designer Second, because I believe that is the important way round. That is what I actually wrote on my Instagram feed. And when I mentioned to Rita that it was on my Instagram, she said this would be a great title of a talk. So thank you, Rita. Thank you to Kaunas for making this happen. The image you see on screen is of me in Detroit a couple of years ago, where I was sitting in front of a sign that says cyber optics. And I like to think that I'm sitting there gazing into the future. But when I came back to my workplace, my colleague said to me, Rama, that's a very bad Tinder photograph. To which I responded, what's Tinder? Which is the only viable and acceptable response to that. So a little bit about the Royal College of Art. The graduates from the college have had global influence in firms such as IDEO, Jaguar, Dyson, and Apple. Apple employ more of our graduates than from any other university. So I don't know if you've heard of Apple, but they make phones. The center that I lead is one of the longest running research centers and units at the college. It's very business facing. We've worked with over 300, done 300 projects with 200 organizations drawn from business, government, and the voluntary sector. We also work with communities. We look at issues of imbalance and exclusion across the world, whether it's gender imbalance in Latin America, migrant workers in the Middle East, or what you see on screen is a taxi redesign project. So I am an active designer and a design activist. I've always wanted to be a designer since I was 14. And here you can see me out conducting research with this lady in a wheelchair called Fiona. And that's not a gun that I'm holding. That is a video camera. I'm not forcing her to give us insights. We're looking at how her travel journey around the city could be made better. I'm going to be talking about inclusive design, and one of the words is design in inclusive design. It's made up of 2 words, and there is a problem with design, and I can prove that to you. So how many of you have a smartphone? If you took the smartphone out, it's a trick question, by the way, if you have a smartphone or not. If you type in the word designer on any SMS or WhatsApp application, the predictive icon that comes up is this. It's kind of, you know, some sort of beret people from the 1940s holding a paintbrush. And is this what designers do? Are we just an artistic endeavor? But design is much more than that. It's a strategy for change, a framework for business, a tool for government, but also it's something for life. Design is about people of all ages, sizes, needs, ability. Almost everything in the world has been through a design decision. So we need to make sure that it's as inclusive as possible. We can say design is centered around people, or rearranging the words, people-centered design. The other word is inclusive design. Now, the British government don't always get everything right. And I can think of a few things, such as Brexit. But if you look at their definition of inclusive design, it's this. It's including the needs of the widest number of people in your design. And I love that definition, because who doesn't want to be inclusive? Inclusive design has a 26-year history now. It was defined by the center in 1994 at this conference called Applied Ergonomics. And we continue to push, to innovate, and to share. On the right, you see a website called designingwithpeople.org. Don't say I don't give you anything free. It's nearly Halloween, so this is your Halloween present. You can log on to that website, and it's all open access, much information there for you as designers and creatives. Inclusive design, though, speaks to social sustainability. It's the 3rd pillar in the sustainability triangle, but it's often missing alongside environmental and economic sustainability. Who said this? It wasn't me. That was the World Bank and the World Economic Forum. They talk about social sustainability being that missing glue in sustainability consideration. But I just say inclusive design is design at its most powerful and its most conscious. It has a global context, but it can have universal impact. So the pandemic has brought issues of exclusion into all of our lives, and 2020 has been marked by pandemic and by protest. But these dark days can truly help us appreciate the light. I do some philosophical writing at an Instagram account called Life's Whispers. Why is it called that? Because life whispers its wisdom It doesn't shout it. And the greatest wisdom and the greatest creativity as a designer can come to you when you are at your most considered and your most quiet. So it's called whispers. And only the dark truly can help you appreciate the light. And I just love that idea that as designers, we deal with situations, challenges. This can be some of the most powerful instigation for our creative practice. Before, we all thought aging happened to someone else. You know, it's someone else's problem, or that disability was someone else's issue. But issues of accessibility and access are now mainstream. We all have reduced access and ability and reduced choice, and we're more reliant than ever on technology. Previously, we all believed in a wonderful nonsense. We were like the peacock on the left of the screen, looking good, rather than the chicken on the right, who's doing good. And I love the fact that she's wearing some rockets on her back and is taking healthcare somewhere. And inclusive design can be messy. Sometimes it isn't pretty. So don't be a peacock, be the chicken, you know, look like the chicken if you need to be, but do good rather than just look good. So now we need inclusive design more than ever across the globe. The picture on the right, which shows some Qatari nationals sitting with migrant workers, it's one of the rarest photographs in my collection because you rarely ever see that. But we used inclusive design to bring people together and actually have that conversation. Inclusive design can be added to almost any design process. I'm not going to go into this slide in detail because I'm pretty sure you're all zoomed out, but there is more information at this website, innovatingwithpeople.net. And we actually, with the Norwegians, supporting the Norwegians, actually wrote a book on it, which is at that website. But this is just to say, whatever is your creative process, inclusive design has an activity that can be added, whether it's the first activity on the left, which is understanding context and designing your research, then moving into the pink area of discovering needs and mapping insights, right the way through to translating briefs and delivering design. So I don't want to preach theory to you. I want to tell you some stories. And I'm going to tell you kind of 5 stories based on 5 principles. And these are them. I'll publish them on Instagram and LinkedIn afterwards, but it's simply this: be human, be useful, make better, people first, and show leadership. And this for me is my personal manifesto, and it's a manifesto for design. So be human. I'll show a case study that we did in Hong Kong, because I think it really demonstrates this. We're working with a university out there, a couple of different departments, a lot of younger designers in their, from the ages of 18 to 23. We were working with older people. The project was called Aging in a Vertical City. And we really challenged the students to design for their future selves. It was a 10-week project. This is Christina. She was a landscape architect out there. And we aged the students digitally and created some tools for them to have a conversation with their older self. And the principle is, don't design anything you wouldn't use. It's not about designing for an 80-year-old. Think about designing for your 80-year-old self. This is Hong Kong. It's very vertical. You know, it's where the movie Blade Runner was based. We had sort of 8 design methods, and I'll just go through them in a very quick fire way. First was seeing, mapping, following people. So how does this 85-year-old woman come from the 50th floor to the local supermarket? Asking, going into people's lives. It was the first time many of the students had actually been into a variety of Hong Kong homes and care homes and understood what older people were about. It's about provoking. So this was a design prototype that we used to provoke response. It's a bed space, and we're talking to this older gentleman about it in his bed space in a care home. It's about futuring. This is Mr. Wong. And we created a kind of future digital service. And then he came in with his granddaughter and drew a red pen all over it, told us what was wrong. And I love it because as designers, he gave us so much information. He just told us what wouldn't work, and the amount of red on the wall. You know, we shouldn't be afraid of people red penning our ideas. Prototyping, well, you all know what that is. Co-creating, a huge part of design is giving people the tools to express themselves, to be vocal and to be visible and to be consulted, but more than that, to actually design themselves. People are not just research guinea pigs. They're living, active human beings. Immersing. So the students actually had to live at the care home and eat there. And finally, the most powerful tool for the designer, listening. And research itself can be a beautiful thing. This is another Mr. Wong who just had a stroke. And the portraiture of this, I just love. It's him in his house. We also took images of the different rooms in his house. This is the bedroom. And culturally, it just brings to life everything that's in his life. This gentleman, you see him sitting surrounded by his life. And this is his bedroom. And again, you can see what matters, what's important. You know, there's a green stool there. That's incredibly important in his life in terms of access and reaching things. This lady's 74. She sleeps on the top bunk so she can remain active. And this is her space. So already, me showing you those three houses, you start to get an impression of Hong Kong houses. They're extremely small, you know, an average of 36 to 40 square meters. So that's kind of the size of 2 or 3 parking spaces. So this was a rich tapestry of research, and the students went out and did this. From that, you know, brilliant tapestry of life, you then move into this. And what happens? You know, the transition is brutal. It's painful. It's fractious. When you can sit at your home with your shirt off, surrounded by stuff, and then you have to move into a space negotiated with other people. You can sit with your tokens of love, your memorabilia, your images, but then you move into the institution. So we created a series of prototypes, which were really tools for conversation. Bear in mind, this was a 10-week project. The things we found, what I love about inclusive design is you find out things that you would never read, you would never hear. Like the number one thing for people in care homes was they didn't like the person in the bed next to them. They wanted to move their bed. And nowhere had I ever seen that written. And recently did a research project in Poland, say the same thing. We developed a couple of bed designs, and you can see the bed here is one cohesive unit. The reason you can't move beds in a care home is a design issue. The curtain rails are fixed into the ceiling, so you can't move the bed. But if you put the curtain rails on the bed, hey, you can move it as one unit. This bed also triples the amount of usable space that a normal bed space has, whilst remaining on the same footprint. And this was the first prototype. You can see the footprint of the previous bed in the background, but there's a lot of things here. You know, I won't go through everything in detail, but the brief was to design a care home bed that rivals the first class cabin on an aircraft, because it's actually the same size. That little, in the front center of the picture, the green and red object is a foldable chair. That came from something that was absolutely heartbreakingly beautiful. It was observing a 90-year-old couple where he had moved into the care home and she was coming to visit him. They'd been together for 70 years, and intimacy for them meant an eye-to-eye conversation. Whenever she came, the care home staff were too busy to get her a chair. So she had to kind of stand or sit on the bed, and it was very awkward. So we designed a chair that could fold to the width of 3 or 4 shirts, hang in the wardrobe, and that she could pull out herself. And if you look at the height of the chair and the height of the bed, they're the same height so that they can sit eye to eye and talk to each other. And the first time they used the prototype, it actually made us cry because it was so beautiful to see them, that human connection. And that is what inclusive design is about. 2 words: improving life. The color palette, if you look at the color palette on the left, that's the existing color palette of care homes. And it's the color of bodily fluids. It's pretty horrible. I hope you've all had lunch. I don't mean to be disgusting, but it's true. The new color palette looked at a lot of the science and methodology behind color, some neuroscience mixed in there as well. And this is how it played out. So the headboard area is dark blue because that helps you rest. And if you get better rest in a care home, you actually are less demanding on the staff and less taxing on yourself. People in a care home are not weak. You have to be extremely strong to be in a care home. So they're not fragile. They're actually very agile in terms of their aspiration. The red is there to signal to older people, this is areas you can touch, because red is one of the last colors to go in your site. The blue area also allows you to hold some of your tokens of love, your images. And this, we were using textile shelves because they could be washed more easily and more kind of virus resistant. And these 2 of the designers, 2 of my colleagues, Samantha and Gabrielle, and they actually told me that when they were working late, they would sleep on the bed prototype. So I took a picture of them because they're actually using their own design. It's not for 80-year-olds. And you can close the curtains and create a cocoon so you can FaceTime your family. And if you don't like your neighbor, you can move your home. This was the team from the UK. There was another 20 people in Hong Kong. And I just love, again, there's another picture of Gabrielle sleeping on the bed. But at the end of the day, it was all about these people. It was about co-designing and co-creating with them. And I just love this reaction that they had to that prototype. We created a number of different prototypes, but I'm not going to share them with you because I want to crack on with the presentation. It's important to bring humanity into technology. This is a short project around humanizing chatbots. Everyone is designing a chatbot. It's absolutely crazy out there, but people are being exclusive with their chatbots. They're not being inclusive. Most chatbots look like this, kind of 25-year-old subservient females. And I think it's because these are designed by 25-year-old computer engineers who maybe designed themselves a girlfriend, and most are male. So, and if you look at gender distribution in AI applications, in the center, the blue strip shows that most assistants are female, but in movie roles, most are male. So are we showing gender discrimination in the digital space that we would not be allowed to do in the workplace? So we need to be careful here. We did a project with an accounting and accounting firm, one of the top 4 in the world, and looked at empathy, wiseness, sincerity, and curiosity as qualities of a chatbot, all with a little touch of happiness is what they wanted. Instead of a subservient girlfriend, we offered them a parent, a gentle authority figure, a boss, a direct authority figure, a friend who could cover up your mistakes, or a coach who could gently coach you. And they chose friend. But the friend they chose was surprising. And it really brought a smile to my face because the friend they wanted was these 2, Dame Judi Dench or David Attenborough, an older, wiser friend who could cover up if you miss a deadline, could make an excuse to your boss, or encourage you to have a glass of wine at the end of the day. Radically different from the kind of, blonde chatbot servant. They actually stopped the development of their chatbot for 3 months to take account of this research. So number one was a really big one. The rest are going to be a little quicker. Number two is just be useful. So whatever you do with your design, make sure it has a use. I want to talk about one of the most challenging projects we ever did. And this deals with the subject of suicide in the city space. So I know, Rita, we are talking about the city space. So this project is really talking to that. I apologize in advance if this affects anyone in the room, but the case study is about 5 minutes long. It's called Our Future Foyle, and the River Foyle splits the city of Derry in Ireland and Northern Ireland. It's been a place that's seen a lot of political turmoil over the decade. It's seen a lot of religious violence, political violence over the decade. The city has 100,000 people, and they've had something like 3,000 incidences of suicide in the last 3 years. They have a saying there that you're ready for the foil. So if you've had a bad day, you're ready for the foil, meaning you're ready to jump in. So this is a creative approach to suicide prevention, a kind of community AI approach to architecture in the city. These are all the logged incidences of suicide. You can see there's 3 bridges, and the bridges feature a lot. Most of the incidences are off the bridges. The railway bridge at the top, the pedestrian bridge in the middle, and then the car bridge at the bottom. We came up with 5 social and cultural interventions. Our team actually moved out there to live in Ireland, and they're still out there. Actually, they're working with the local mayor, and they've actually set up a community enterprise to build some of these ideas. I'm only going to show you 2 in the interest of time. One is called Foil Bubbles. We can't build anything on the banks of the river, but we thought, what if you create these architectural pods that are made of wood? So you're not building anything, you're just wheeling them in. And anyone in the community can apply for one for free, but they have to undergo mental health support training. Because if someone is in crisis on the river, they're not going to reach out to family, the police, the hospital, or authorities, but they may talk to a friendly stranger. So the community that will be built around the river, they are the ones that can support people in crisis. And the early trials of this show this to be very, very positive. So this isn't just a design idea. We've been testing it and developing it. This is how it might work. It's AI enabled. So it'll sit there. It can interact with people. So if tourists come and ask, where can I get a Guinness? It'll tell them. And I'm told these people are from Florida because of the length of this guy's socks. My American friends tell me they're definitely from Florida. So it will tell them where to go. You know, there's a little bar just up the street on your left, on your right there. If someone is misbehaving, it'll recognize that and it will tell them to wise up, behave, you're on camera. But the most important thing, the most touching thing, is if someone is in crisis on the riverfront, and this typically happens in the dark hours of the night, the city itself, the fabric and the architecture of the city can reach out and ask that all-important question, are you okay? And that question is incredibly important. It can mean the difference between jumping or not jumping. Foil Reeds is an intervention we did on the bridge. This car bridge, which is 9 stories, 9 floors high. And this is the walkway, which is thoroughly scary. I'm not very tall, but even I was scared walking across this in the high wind. Important you don't design from a distance. This was me on the boat. And I just wanted to see how they mimic an emergency response. And going out there in the freezing cold, you really understand what it is as a designer to be out there. I'm sorry I'm making a kind of internet duck face, but it was that cold. My face was frozen back. And they told some harrowing stories of how they had to leap overboard to grab people, and they just knew their teammates would be pulling them back. And they told me the story of this one woman who had jumped, and because it was winter, the water was a bit rough. So they were literally 5 seconds too late to grab her. So one of them jumped in and the other teammates were tethered and they were pulling him. And he just managed to grab her hair as she was going under. And he pulled her back into the boat. And they resuscitated her, took her to hospital. And every month on the day she jumped, she sends them a card to say, I'm still alive. Because when that hand came down, I could see it. And with the searchlight, it was framed like a halo. And she said, it was the first time in my life that someone reached out to me and felt like asking that question, are you okay? So that for me is the power of design. That is incredibly the power of design. We instead of putting up barbed wire fences, we drew inspiration from nature. And this is what we created, which was a lighting installation that would go along the bridge like this. It could be controlled by a phone so the community could take charge of it. And it turns this place of desperation into one of aspiration, a place where people go to end their life into a place where people go to celebrate their life. So true story, they actually launch a yacht race from there now, and it's just changed the feeling of the riverbank. Number 3 is make things better. Design can make every conversation better. We may not save the world as designers, architects, creatives, entrepreneurs, and innovators, but we're often missing from conversation. So make sure you have a seat at the table. You know, simple things like, can you peel a carrot one-handed? This was a project we did for Arthritis Research UK. And the answer is yes. If you fix the cutting board to the kitchen table using a kind of rubber mat so it doesn't move, and you just fix this special implement there and you can peel a carrot one-handed. Can color change a person's life? We were working in a care home and they were saying the older people had given up, they weren't eating, they'd given up on life. We realized they just couldn't see the food. They were putting white food on a white plate in a dark room. So we changed the lighting, put the food on a blue plate, and people started eating again because they could actually see the food. And that for me was just a simple design change. This is another case study, just checking the time, yeah, that pulls a lot of this together. This was looking at the environment of an airport and moving towards a gold standard. OCC stands for Operations Control Center. So, you know, I'm taking you from suicide and care homes into the airport. The brief was to improve the operational efficiency of an Asian airline whilst improving the customer experience. So they got things right for the customer. Did they get it right for their staff? The Operations Control Center is the beating heart of the airline. It never closes. It's open every day, all hours of the day, every day of the year. We did a lot of rapid ethnography. You know, we did observations, interviews, workshops. We lived alongside these people for 2 weeks. 14 different departments are there to get an aircraft off the ground. And we found some surprising things. We asked the management, what does a good day look like for you? And they said, well, when 97% of the planes take off and land on time. We asked the staff and they said, I like it when something goes wrong. And that's because you do everything to solve the problem. You feel like a family, you work together, you come together as a team. And those two opposing things they had never spoken about. So we looked at designs in 3 different areas: technology, people, and the environment. We redesigned their technology wall. And, you know, there's lots of good inclusive design, UX stuff I can go into here, but it was co-created with them, with about 30 people that are in the OCC. But the thing I wanted to pull out was this. There's a lot of downtime. We observed a lot of boredom. So this screen, when everything is fine in the system, can go into an educational mode and give tips. It can tell you to get better sleep, give you IT support, or introduce you to other people or sing happy birthday. It was something that they really, really loved, and it leaned into the family feel that they have. We looked at the environment, introducing things such as a light shower. You've got to be alert for your 12-hour shift. So instead of having a water shower, could you have a light shower and actually refresh yourself? You know, this is the environment. You know, it is one of the most airless environments ever. And we were looking at how you could open it up and bring in biophilia, how you could change the working patterns to actually make things better. And the final designs look at the office area, the rest area, because funnily enough, they don't have rest areas. And then the kitchen, there's a lot of different religions there. So how do you divide the kitchen up, but also make it a space where people go to refresh, rejuvenate, and have a conversation. At the moment, it's just a couple of microwaves stuck in a cupboard. We also looked at, in these times of COVID, 5 people can share a desk. So how do you make a desk your own? So on the left of the screen, you see the mess that people have, you know, and they pack this all away at the end of the shift. And you know, then they have to bring it back. So we thought, what happens if you have this little suitcase that you can store in your locker, and then you pull it out, place it under the desk, and you take the cover of the suitcase and it actually becomes your own personal little setup. The suitcase holds everything that you need, including blankets, pillows, etc., even aromatherapy and stuff for eye yoga. But the project I really wanted to share with you on this was a simple observation. We were tasked with the airline with changing their UX, because they said people are not taking the iPads and the computers we're giving them. They're still relying on paper. So can you change the UX? Because it's obviously the fault of the device or the hardware. And we looked at this and thought, something's not quite right here. And instead of spending millions of pounds changing the hardware and the UX, we actually redesigned the vest. And this is what happened. So it's a 1.5 minute video.
Design is most powerful when it's inclusive, empathic, and creative. Creativity shots show you how. 14 different departments help get the plane off the ground. How does technology support? We looked at airlines, airplanes, and airports. Passengers see one flight number, but 200 people work behind the scenes. How do they communicate? And what technology do they use? We spent time with the teams. We observed and immersed. This stood out. People cannot carry everything, but they take the high-vis vest everywhere. It was not about technology. It was about behavior. The answer wasn't a new device or interface. It was a more technology-friendly vest. So, some creativity checks for your project. 1. See beyond the obvious. Reality rules. 2. Are you answering the wrong brief? Design makes every conversation better. We design with a difference. To make a difference, we design different.
So I love the idea that the greatest piece of technology design isn't actually a piece of technology. And this is something that leads very well into the next item. So these two are very quick, but it's putting people first. Hero the project, not the designer. This is one of my most inspirational photographs. It's of a Japanese CEO from 30 years ago. His name is Sadamura-san. He was asked to design a new metro line, 16 stations, all the trains, everything. He went out and did the research. He was never too busy, never too important. This is him going around the Tokyo Underground with someone in a wheelchair. And what he created was achingly beautiful. The most comfortable train line still in the world. People go from all around the world to see this. And inclusive design is beautiful. So work with real people, you know, as we see here. Don't work with fake people, you know, personas. There's 7.6 billion people on the planet. Go and find a real person. Don't make up a fake one, because you might as well be designing for these two or these two if you're creating from a persona. It's important that you understand context. You know, Samsung came to us and said, can you design a phone for older people? We said there's 13,000 models of mobile phone there. It's not about that. It's about understanding the context of people's lives. So this is where your phones are going to be used. And simple observation can spark ideas. You know, this is, these are drips in a hospital, and drips are always very tall, but they're hung by short nurses. Graphic design hierarchy says you put the title of everything at the top, but that's the first area of the bag to collapse. And the nurses keep on having to walk across the wards and check the title of what is in this bag that's collapsing. So we just said a simple no-cost solution is put the name at the bottom, then you can see it at a glance, and you don't have to walk across the ward. And for nurses, that's incredibly important. It can save them something like 15% of their walking is to check stuff. Think about people of all abilities. This is the number of millions of people in geographic Europe with a disability. Wheelchair users at the top is less than 5 million. Cannot walk without aid is about 45. So disability isn't just about wheelchair users. It's just being unable to do anything, as this picture demonstrates. If you're carrying luggage, if you're a little older, if you've got a baby, if you're a little drunk, if you're a little stressed, you're effectively disabled. Look at different forms of exclusion by the social, the economic, the geographic, financial, gender, ability, age, but also race is incredibly important. And inclusive design has can support all of this. When you think of people, don't make research a boring exercise. This was something that was done with pregnant women to understand a week in their life. And they had to fill in all of this information. But what was really lovely is we gave them a tea bag and a healthy pregnancy snack. And we said, when you have this snack and drink our tea, please fill in our research. And at the end of the year, we gave the research back to them because we said, this is a snapshot of the week of your pregnancy for you to give your baby when he or she grows up. We also talked to women who are in their 50s and 60s and asked them to write their most memorable experiences on an image of their younger pregnant self. And this became such a beautiful repository of images. So research itself is beautiful. Number 5, the final one, is show leadership. We have this thing called creative leadership because we believe that you need creatives in leadership position and leaders who are creative. It's based on 3 principles: empathy, clarity, and creativity. And there's more on our website about this. But, you know, this is from Boston Consulting Group, and he says CEOs who lead with emotion and empathy are more likely to succeed in creating lasting change. I like the poetic version where it's better to seek empathy or love than power. This is from India's poet laureate Tagore, who said, "Power said to the world, 'You are mine,' and she imprisoned him on her throne. Love said to the world, 'I am yours,' and she gave him the freedom of her house." So empathy sets you free. Power contains you. Clarity is important. You know, clarity in communication. As designers, you can sum up a 3-hour movie in 4 icons. You know, there's a ship, there's a couple of people dancing, there's an iceberg, and there she is alone. So of course it's Titanic. Creativity. Well, I think I've shown you a lot of creative projects, but this one was just, can you restock an ambulance in 5 minutes instead of 45 minutes? The answer is yes. If you remove the cupboards and put in treatment packs, at the end of the shift, you take out the 5 treatment packs and you just put in 5 new ones. You don't need to open every drawer in the cupboards in the back. This is just to say empathy is a spectrum. So you could be the Godfather or you could be the Dalai Lama. Clarity is a spectrum. You could have the lack of clarity like there is around Brexit, or the simplicity of the Nike slogan, which says, just do it. And creativity is a spectrum. So the Eye of Sauron on the left just did evil. It didn't really do anything else. But the Tate Modern on the right is a place where the exhibitions change. You go there for creative value. I'm going to skip that. So just to round off in the last 3 minutes, I'm keeping an eye on the time, Gerata. These are the 5 things: be human, be useful, make better, people first, and show leadership. And this isn't always easy. As the great philosopher Denzel Washington said, you pray for the rain, you've got to deal with the mud too. And inclusive design and innovation can be muddy. Mike Tyson put it differently, but he said every boxer has a plan until they get punched in the head. So nothing ever goes according to plan. Be prepared for the punch in the head. But as designers, you can reorientate, you can change. So final top tips. Let your creative self shine and bring balance. Doing all of this outward work, look after yourself, your inward self. And this is actually some yoga that we were doing with a group of fashion buyers from China. Don't just focus on other people with inclusive design. Also focus on yourself, your own needs, your own empathy, and the world will be a more balanced place. Go beyond Post-it notes. Design is not death by Post-it notes. Design experiences. You're not designing products, spaces, services, or systems. You're designing an experience. And design for people, not users or consumers. This one is so important. We talk about users or consumers, but users use, consumers consume, but people live. And remember, don't design from a distance. And finally, you can create the most inclusive, wonderful, amazing projects, but above all, make sure you get your spelling correct. And it took me 3 months to realize that that should say bamboo shoot, not bamboo shit. And it was my mother that told me that. So here is a little more information at our link tree. And you can always reach out to me on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm very happy to talk to you there. Thank you very much. We have a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Rama, so much. I mean, for this very, very inspiring presentation, I should say. And this is probably the second time you made me almost cry. The first one, when we had the interview with Rama, actually, in the Lithuanian newspaper. And that was probably the first time I was reading the text about the design, and it was so touchy and so emotional. So thank you, really. As we have still some minutes and no questions from the audience, can I ask one from our perspective, you know, being or coming from the post-Soviet environment? We still talk about the design from the very different perspective. We think that the designers are more like artists and not the inventors of the space. We usually speak about that we lack empathy as a society. So what would be your advice? How can we learn, or can we learn empathy at all?
Absolutely. We work with a neuroscientist, and empathy is a tendency, can be developed, it can be trained. And I'll give you a little tip. Here's a little exercise you all can do. 2 little exercises to train yourself in empathy. Number 1 is go out and get a stranger to tell you a secret. We actually run that in workshops. And that will teach you everything you know about your level of empathy. How comfortable are you? How will you create that level of trust? The second thing with empathy is it's one of those things, if you express it, it comes back tenfold, 10 times. We've been running a creative leadership workshop this morning, and we were talking about empathy. We're talking about the 3 most important words in the English language, and people said it's "I love you," which is true. I also think it's "I love you too," because if no one says "I love you" back, then, it's a little embarrassing. But the most important words for me is actually "I see you." So in your life, in your work, think about who do you need to acknowledge, and actually go up to them and say, I see what you did there. I see your life. And as a designer, you are tasked, you have the responsibility of seeing people's lives, of empathizing with that, and designing for and with that. So I think those are 2 quick little exercises we use to just develop empathy. But the short answer is yes, empathy is not a static thing. It expands, it contracts, it moves, and it can be developed.
Let's hope we can do that too. To learn it. What I loved, again, the sentence from your interview, to be honest, because it's very fashionable now to think about the design thinking, to speak about the design thinking. And you said that if you don't really interact with people, then your design thinking starts to stink. This is very good. Again, a quote of yours, and very powerful. To rethink and revise the designer's work.
Yeah, so don't do design thinking. Sorry, don't do design thinking. That is design stinking. And design thinking has been great at getting design into the boardroom, seeing it as a framework and a strategy. But don't forget to do also design doing, to actually apply design and to bring it from the framework and the strategies into practice. And I think that's where you need inclusive design. And I would say that because I love inclusive design. So I may be biased. My presentation comes with a health warning. I may be biased.
Thank you, Rama. Maybe the presenters, Maxime and Rita, want to react on Rama's presentation, as we still have some minutes.
Oh, I would just add that I was, of course, amazed by his presentation. I think that I've learned a lot. I took some notes also, because I like to, every time is a learning experience for me. So thanks for sharing all these very important insights. I like, this concept of inclusive design, because very frequently I think that we as a designer are represented like artists, because people really don't get to the point of what's the meaning of design, or what's the purpose of design. So I think that the more people are involved in this creative process, and they can feel exactly, the utility of what we do, and the most we do meaningful project, the better, design will be used as a tool for a larger community of people. So it's not about being fashionable or being trendy. It's about doing meaningful actions that are really improving people's life in a way or another. So thanks.
My honor, my honor. I look forward to learning from your presentations. What you say is so true. There's an American author called Richard Bach who said, we're all learners, doers, and teachers. And every time I do these things, I learn so much from the panelists, from other people. So I'm looking forward to learning.
As for me, as I have only one thing to say, which is that Rama has stolen much of my argumentation. So, but put it much better than I would do anyway. So, but the good thing is that I knew it in advance, because I know a little bit your work, and so I was ready to switch to other ideas, which I will do straight away. But yes, I really stick to virtually everything you told, and to your conception of design. Not being a designer myself, and I will about that difference also. And about this notion of inclusivity, I'm very much concerned with a lot of bias, with intersecting bias from different sides about ethnicity and gender and other aspects of people's lives, ability, which are not necessarily taken into account. So this whole concept of how you include people, and first how you direct the design process towards people in the first place, not towards the designers, as you said as you put in your title, is really valuable. And that's more than an introduction to the discussion, that you covered most of what we believe, I think, also with Rita.
Thank you. And I think that idea of bringing it back to human first, designer second, I think we all have creativity, clarity, and empathy. We all have design ability in us. So just a final sentence, that inclusive design is something that's there for everyone, not just for the design group. So thank you so much for bringing that up, because I wouldn't want anyone to walk away thinking inclusive design is just for designers. I know I've been talking a lot about the design word, but it is an offering for this world and this space and this gorgeous little planet we are all on.
The only one, right? Okay, thank you, Rama, once again, very much. And Maxime, before I give you a floor, I would love to introduce you to our listeners. Maxime is a senior researcher and lecturer at Sciences Po, Paris University, France. His research interests include how design thinking and process can be applied to public services and policies and contribute to reshaping the way our communities and cities work. Since 2011, he has also been a project manager at Yellow Window Design Consultants, a French and Belgium-based design agency specialized in service design, policy design, and mobility. Jointly with designers, he intervenes in areas such as health, social innovation, inclusion, mobility, housing, aging, or gender equality. And in 2020, he inaugurated at UNESCO-listed Le Corbusier housing unit in Marseille, one of the most achieved modernist urban experiments, a third space where architects, urban planners, researchers, and designers can join force and share ideas about the design city of tomorrow. And jointly with Laura Zara, he is involved in a design residency to enhance the national and international recognition of Kaunas modernist heritage. So Maxime today is posing a question. If a design city is not a city made by designers, what is it meant to be then? Maxime.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you. So I'm starting my presentation also with a warning, as you ended up yours. I'm not a designer. Indeed, I come from the field of political science, and I will tell you what it entails for my approach to design. But one of the first consequences I see popping up in my mind is that I learned in those type of design-centered symposia, not always to make a PowerPoint presentation, especially if coming after a designer, because they look terribly poor, mine. So I decided last minute not to put mine, and also because I knew that I will have to adapt to the content of Rama's presentation. So what does it mean to deal with design, not being a designer, but coming from the field of public policies and political science, where, well, when you are a political scientist, as I am, what you study most of the time is the story of failure. The failure of health policies to take care of people, for instance, in times of pandemics, the failure of inclusion policies to include people, the failure of urban policies to make urban environment better, the failure of environmental policies to prevent global warming, and so on and so on. So the first reason that comes to my colleagues' mind usually is that, well, the politics is wrong, the people are wrong, the system is wrong. Actually, I would say it is rather the process. The process is wrong because people are not looked at in this process. They are like mostly looked over, and because if they are considered either as electors who vote every 4 or 5 years. If they do, a substantial share of them don't vote, as users temporarily for a specific policy or system or transportation facility, and worse of everything, as consumers, people who are in a passive position of taking what is provided, not offered, obviously, to them for a certain amount of money that they may not have. But they are not looked at as people living their lives and living their experience. So I do strongly agree with Rama's point. So at some point, I got a little bit tired of studying this story of a failure, and I wanted to see if we perhaps could change the process of doing policies. And this is when I turned to designers. I had the chance to meet designers in a EU-funded project on gender equality policies in the whole European Union. And with this design agency with which I have started to collaborate at that moment, nearly 10 years ago, I realized that designers, especially if they were mobilizing the appropriate methodologies, approach, if they were sufficiently empathetic, if they were actually involving people in co-design, were holding part of the solution to the big problem we face at municipal, regional, national, or global levels. And that it was by working with them that instead of studying the story of failures indefinitely, I could ultimately contribute to fix a few issues, a few problems, and document those successes and spread them. So that's what the difference is when you don't come from the design field yourself. It's not by vocation. It's because you realize that the track on which you are is perhaps not the right one, or at least not the only one on earth. Another quick consequence of my position as a non-designer in this virtual tribune and room today is that I'm talking maybe on the first place to the non-designers in the room, and maybe also to the skeptics, to those who might still wonder there in Kaunas what it actually means to be a design city, and who may wonder still if it matters to them at all. So this is especially to those people I would like to direct my presentation, and hoping it will be complementary to the two others. So if I'm correct, it's been 5 years since Kaunas joined the Design City Network, which is part of the UNESCO Creative City Network established back in 2004. And I'm sure that over these 5 years, you have learned a lot on how design can reshape a city landscape, and how it can contribute to create better environment also for its citizens. That is an environment which is not only nicer, prettier, as Rama put it, but also more attractive for other people to come and live in, more creative, more inclusive indeed, and also more sustainable in environmental, social, or economical terms. So in itself, I guess that this worldwide network of design cities, which are all committed to putting design to the center of their development strategies and to the center of their identities, embodies many of the vast range of the possibilities which are offered by design to achieve those aims of being more attractive, more creative, more inclusive, and more sustainable. And I guess also that every single of these cities, maybe especially those which have long invested in design, provide good practices example especially with regard to how design can further enhance or help restoring, in some cases, social cohesion and community well-being, how it can transform the image of a city through product, transportation, information or service design, for instance, how design can help addressing economic, social, environmental, and technical or technological challenges, and how it can provide solutions ultimately for better policies and services. And there are many, when you look at the list, the huge list of those members of the Design City network, you see cities which are in very different position, which have different size, which sometimes are capital cities, well known internationally, or sometimes are smaller cities which have been living in the shadow of the capital city. I won't quote any name, and which are also facing challenges which are crucially different. For instance, a transition from a post-industrial world to a technological industry, for instance. So there are many issues at stake in relation to being a design city and to being part of this network, and that create different challenges and different ecosystems for each of those cities to actually use design as a leverage for change and for transformation. So the members of this network usually all together illustrate the transformative potential of design, but they also illustrate a huge variety in terms of framing, of understanding what design is about and how it can actually make a difference, and especially difference for people living in each of those cities. And this framing process, that is how people will get or not to understand together what it means for them to be a design city, depends on different factors, some of which I have already mentioned. So for instance, whether you are the capital city of your country or not makes a big difference, because there is an issue of international reputation, because usually capital cities, even in the developing world, have access to more resources because they concentrate a lot of knowledge production. They have like large universities, and they may produce also many designers, among other categories of city practitioners. The size, obviously, is also a crucial issue, because this will make the challenge having also different sizes. Then their position between an industrial past and a technological industry future, for instance, the fact to be in a transition, on a path of transition from a golden era that has long disappeared towards a future that might be bright but is still not fully there. We have many examples among the Design City network of cities that have decided to take that path with the support of design as a leverage for this transition from the past toward the future. And in the case of France, my own country, I'm thinking of Saint-Étienne, that used to be a very industrial, like, Midland style city, and with a lot of heavy industries that eventually all disappeared at some point. And reinventing itself through design was one probably of the little option at hand, and it was a matter of survival for the city to take that path right. Then other variables can also come into play, such as the capacity of these cities to train designers and other types of city practitioners. So whether they have or not a strong and robust higher education system, which is the case of Kaunas, for instance. And maybe a last variable that matters a lot is their degree of inclusion or exclusion in the globalization processes, whether those cities are like holds firm on the map of globalization, or whether they are like a little bit marginalized with respect to information or flux and also exchanges of goods and migratory routes and so on and so on. All that altogether is making the phenomenon of globalization. So based on this diversity of context, of local challenges, of strengths and weaknesses, these cities have individually explored one or more of the transformation levers that design can actually offer. And they are providing, as I said, a number of great examples that I'm sure are worth for you to learn from. But there is a but. This diversity of paths towards becoming or affirming yourself as a design city can eventually result a little bit puzzling for relatively newcomers. And by newcomers, I'm thinking, for instance, of Kaunas, which is a city that has joined this network relatively recently and might still be in this process of defining what it means for itself to be a design city. But it can be also puzzling for those who, as the practitioners of this tribune, as Rama and as Rita, or as myself, have a rather holistic approach to design. That is an approach for which designers are only one type among a variety of stakeholders, as much relevant as them to the design process, people, users, depending how you call them and depending also of the context, architects, urban planners, other type of creative people, artists, and so on and so on, who may hold part of what is important is in the fact of being a design city. An approach for which designing fine, that is pretty objects, and placing them in the city landscape does definitely not equal to providing a better environment. I mean, it's nice to acknowledge the value of the local design, for instance, and to make sure that the public spaces and your daily environment is improved through this quality design. But this is perhaps not the main aspect that will actually transform your environment. And Rama gave a lot of very telling examples about that, also emphasizing the fact that a design can be muddy, can be quite ugly, as long as it answers people's need and realities and like contribute to improve their living experience. But also an approach, and this is also what I mean by an holistic approach to design, for which training future generations of designers will not be sufficient to meet broader economic, societal, urban, or environmental challenges that require innovative solutions. So in sum, an approach in which a design city is neither a city made by designers, for sure, or only by designers, nor a city full of designers, either that they are trained locally or that they come as visitors because they are thrilled by the fact that this city is reivindicating design as part of its identity. That's not the main point, I guess. So looking more into the details of this design city network, I'm afraid that only a fraction of those design cities dared to explore more than a few of the possibilities offered by design to actually transform cities. For the majority of them, and certainly the aspects they are focused on fit their context and fit their need, but they also occasionally reflect a relatively narrow definition of design, which places the emphasis on tangibility, that is on hardware or things that you can touch and see and feel. That places also the emphasis on aesthetics, on beauty, or on technology, rather than people, rather than processes, or rather than services to the community. So that take part of what design can actually bring to a urban environment, but not the full of what it can actually bring, and that Rama already explored in some dimensions. So as you all know, in your 5th year of this learning process, of this learning journey towards being actually a design city, what I humbly invite you is to zoom out and to primarily look at design as a process, a mean to bring about clever and sustainable solutions to issues which are relevant to many, and not as an end in itself, which is usually only relevant to a few, and mostly to designers themselves. In brief, what I suggest, complementarily to other speakers, is for all of you to embrace design as something that you own yourself, no matter you are a designer, a creative person or not, and not something nice but reserved to a few people, a limited number of practitioners that have been trained to do that. So that would be my main argument. What I believe is that in Kaunas, you're kind of well placed to do that. Why? Because I would like you to remember that design as a concept, and in its first acknowledged definition, although I do agree with Rama, many projects for a long time have went through a design process indeed. But what we call today design was certainly born at the Bauhaus School in 1919, slightly more than 1 century ago. A school that was placed first in Weimar, a classic, tiny, kitschy German city, very much anchored into the past. You know, it was a city of Goethe and Schiller and so on. But then in Dessau, a Bauhaus-shaped industrial city, very typical of the early 20th century. And at the Bauhaus, it was the first time that architects, painters, craftsmen, and women, because it was a mixed school, scenographers also were brought together, and they were brought together to collectively design living environment, places and objects where people actually live. So daily use objects, furniture, buildings, ultimately neighborhoods, and full cities. So it was a transdisciplinary approach that was breaking the boundaries of fine arts, of craftsmanship, of architecture, of urbanism, and that was placing the emphasis on functionality. And that was actually broke the first valid definition of what design is. So from the very beginning, design was not made primarily for designers. It was a much broader process, and its intention were almost unlimited. They were trying to reach out how human communities are living. And as the Bauhaus was a multinational environment, this definition was implemented across the globe, from Mexico to Indonesia, from Palestine to Morocco, from Siberia to Bohemia. But there are very few places where it left its mark on the full city fabric. And some of those places are Tel Aviv and Kaunas. And this was made possible only when political, social, economic conditions were reunited to make of this endeavor of designing a new place, a new homeland, a new home to people, was made a collective endeavor, was something that was embraced by the whole community as a mean of transformation, and not merely as a fashion or as a work of a small avant-garde. And this happened in a very few places. And it happened in Kaunas, because Kaunas was, as we all know, at that time, the capital city of a newly restored country. So I think that Kaunas is not only well placed to understand this broader, genuine approach to design, but it also it is also right, it is also correct in putting its own Bauhaus-inspired modernist heritage and its cutting-edge technological university to the heart of its design policy. So I believe that you made really clever choices in doing so, because it is indeed what it is about, I think, transforming a city in a consistent way so as to make it a better place to live through new venues, new technologies, new services, and create knowledge to support this ongoing process. So I get that you definitely have very enabling starting condition that should lead you, and that's my point, to go beyond the obvious, as Rama said, when it comes to being a design city. Don't do only the easy things. Don't limit yourself to make your city look a little bit more design or to produce more designers. Try to make it a better place to live for everyone in that city, for disenfranchised people, for people with disabilities, for both men and women, for the youth and the elderly people, for people no matter their linguistic or cultural background, so that they own part of the city and that they are part of its heart. But a century has passed, obviously, since the Bauhaus shaped the way we understand design. And over these 100 years, many things have changed, and so has the definition of design. Our world has turned more individualistic, as people were increasingly being acknowledged in their diversity of experiences and need, which required user-centered solutions. It has also turned more immaterial and more intangible, because services, policies, and digital tools shape today most of our experience of life, and especially in the city, and our experience of the world at large. And this implies that services and policies also have to be designed, not only products. So the galaxy of design is an ever-expanding one, and designing services and solutions that meet people's need is as much relevant as designing products, transportation, mobility services, or spaces, which are things which are tangible. So if design is about crafting larger and smaller objects, if it's also about crafting information systems that works, health services that are more efficient, or employment policies that lead people to get back to employment, things which are both tangible and intangible, what does make it distinctive as such, as a concept? First, we know since the Bauhaus, or let's put it that way, since Kaunas was made the capital of modern Lithuania, if you prefer, that design is transdisciplinary. It does not only belong to designers, but also to, as I said, architects, urban planners, graphic designers, craftsmen and women, which make it relevant to a lot more of people and maybe people in that virtual room. Second, since the 1960s, we know that design is first and foremost a process. We insisted already on that, a way to generate ideas based on observing and listening, to prototype solutions and to test it. A process which is not unidirectional, you don't know where exactly you are going to, but which is iterative, as you may have to get back to observation if the prototype that you designed failed to deliver its promised solution or services. And since the 1990s, we know also that design is very much about people we need to empathize with to understand their needs and their experience and where they would like to get to. What we lately discovered about design translated into an ever-broadening scope of uses of this method and concept and process, which has blurred the boundaries between product, service, or policy design processes, and which has also increased very much the number of issues or problems to which design is sought to bring a potential solution. So another relatively recent trend is to approach design as a truly collaborative process through the type of examples that Rama has already mentioned. So more than a source of observation or just a subject for empathy for the designers themselves, the people are increasingly seen as stakeholders for co-designing part of the solution. So this is very much a direction to which I would like to invite you. And I think that you have taken a number of steps into that direction already. I will give only one example because I'm reaching to the end of my time. This example is the residence that Rita mentioned when you did present me, is in the work that you are doing to make acknowledged your modernist heritage and to make it part of the true identity of the city and the ownership of the world community. You decided to invite people from outside, from a variety of background and perspective, sociologists, political scientists, designers, graphic designers, community workers, to work with you and with people living in those modernist buildings in order to find out how to better value them, how to make them better known to other Lithuanians, to Europeans, and to the world at large. And the residents that we will, the series of residents that we will have as part of this process are really exemplifying the type of design approach that we have been talking about since the beginning of this tribune. We will start by listening and observing the actual uses of this building, which are owned by real or lived in by real people, and their relation to those, to this concrete and to this architecture. And from that, we will learn probably a lot of things on what shaped their daily experience of those buildings. Then we will involve designers from outside and from inside, and people who are not designers, to provide additional insight on what has worked well in other countries in like interpreting modernist heritage and Bauhaus heritage. And there are many good practices coming from Poland, coming from other Baltic countries, or coming from former Czechoslovakia, for instance, or from France, as I am living myself in a UNESCO modernist building. So we will share all of that. And at some point, we will get engaged in a co-design process so as to bring about specific objects that reflect this collective experience of Kaunas modernism, and hoping that those objects that will certainly take very various form, lower or higher technology, different type of support and materials, will be part of the instruments that Kaunas has at its available in order to make this patrimony, which is so specific to your city, part of your identity as a design city.
Thank you very much, Maxime, for your insights and many advices. I was writing all the time the notes, taking notes, and just to reflect a little bit that your ideas are in a better line with the thinking that is going on around. I'm extremely excited to learn what will happen from those residences, so to say. But many ideas that you have, described or out louded today, like holistic approach, which is a real challenge for a city to talk about, to be honest, because it's a very narrow understanding about the design. Still, when we talk in our environment, which is really design not friendly, I would say. Normally, coming from the post-Soviet area, we didn't have even the word design. From the linguistic point of view, it's even difficult for us to accept the design with all notion that is floating in the air, around the world. So it's a very challenging goal. But the process, I totally agree with you that the stressing process is very important. Talking about the public services, to be honest, we think that the design process might be the main issue of the city. And we have just recently had the talk on Monday with the design community talking about the Lithuanian design policy. And the designers would also stress the importance of the process in various levels, not talking about the products, processes, product services, but also the process as a public, for the public services, which is still under discovered area, I should say. And what is really also for us to talking about the public services is the how to pose the question how we as a city can become a good customer. How can we, how can we act as a good customer? And just the last thing to react under your, idea of Bauhaus, not a style, but the school, which is also correlated with the designers' discussion on Monday, also taking into the consideration the new European Bauhaus, the idea of European Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen that is now underlying this main line, the whole Europe moving to this trend. I think it makes a lot of sense to actualize it. So thank you very much once again for all those insights and advices, like recipes, how the city could work later on.
Maybe I have just, if I can, in 30 seconds, I have one more that I'm sorry that I've forgotten. I think you mentioned one big challenge is to get people understand what especially Rama tried to say as well, which is that design is much more than designers, that it is a variety of opportunities and that it is very process related and that it is about people and life. That's one challenge. The other challenge you may face, and we had discussion about that as well, is that when you suggest to decision makers, for instance, or to policymakers, and I've been a policymaker myself, that you will involve people in a co-design process, they run out of the room usually, because they think that it will take ages and that they will end up with as many ideas as there will be people in the room, because they don't get it. You have to reassure them by telling that we will do that with a method. The method is design. We will make of people in the room co-designers, not people that we invite to give, to just share what pop up in their head, And you will maybe show them the sequence of the Simpson TV show. You have a Simpson episode where Homer Simpson is invited by the Detroit car manufacturers. It was before Tesla came in and broke all the business. So it was like the late 1990s. And those guys, they were aware that they were doing bad cars that were no longer bought by the average US citizen. They were buying Toyotas at that time. And so they invited Homer Simpson to design a car. It's the best car for the best average citizen that he was embodying. And obviously it ends up with a terrible car that looks like nothing, because there was no method, because there was no brief, because it was not co-designed. It was like just giving the pencil to someone who was not able to do it, but the brief was not that bad. The ideas of Homer Simpson were actually clever. So the idea, what you can tell them is show them that trailer, that episode of Homer Simpson, and tell this is exactly the opposite of what we're going to do. And they might be reassured.
That's a great idea. Design thinking with listening to people, right? Coming back to the Rama's idea. Thank you, Maxime, once again. I think I should turn to Rita Orlando now. Let me introduce you. Rita is an architect, open design school project manager from Matera, Italy. And she is an architect with a long-lasting experience in cultural projects focused on local development, working with developed communities. From the beginning of her career, she has been coordinating multidisciplinary teams and innovative projects with a significant cultural impact. Since 2013, she has been contributing to the successful bidding process of the city of Matera as European Capital of Culture 2019. Yes, we are on the same boat. And she has been responsible for the implementation and management of the Open Design School project. Currently, Rita is involved in DEOS project, a regional vocational educational training project that aims to co-create a European-wide learning and training approach in design, critical thinking, and entrepreneurship to find participatory, creative, and cost-effective solutions to local challenges. Voila. so many things too.
Wow, yes. Too many things. Too many.
No, not really. And Rita, today you will share with us the presentation under the title, the long one, by the way, Design as a form of collaborative culture practices in a process of community development, the experience of Open Design School Matera.
Okay, thanks, Jurate. I will start with the video that I will comment on. So let me share my screen. And let's start. Okay, so welcome to the Open Design School Matera. The Open Design School Matera is, like we have mentioned before, the new Bauhaus for Europe. Is indeed a tentative of recreating the Bauhaus approach and spirit. It's a design workshop that has been funded for the occasion of Matera 2019, European Capital of Culture, because we meant to transform this big event, this enormous festival, into a chance for community to rethink to itself, but also to reshape and transform the city. The Open Design School is a place where different creatives of any ages and different background work together. They come from any corner of Europe. We put together people from the local context, from the national context, and from the rest of the world, because we strongly believe that not only the difference of cultural background, but also geography has an impact of the kind of experience of empathy as well that people can bring with themselves. So the Open Design School is indeed, it's not a school, but indeed it's a place where you can learn while you share knowledge with other people. So we use a peer-to-peer approach where everyone is a teacher and a learner at the same time. So we don't have a precise or a rigid hierarchy. Me, myself, I'm just managing or facilitating the process, it's like that, but I'm not the boss. So we let people organize by themselves and give them the freedom to use all their abilities and all their knowledge without feeling the judgment for the result. So in this way, in this sense, at the Open Design School, it's much more important the process than the final product. So the concept that basis of the Open Design School was this one. So for Matera 2019 and for a European Capital of Culture, that indeed is a festival that lasts for 1 year, and you have like 10 years of preparation, and you organize a lot of events. So you use a lot of infrastructures for events. So we wonder why, instead of renting those infrastructures, so parachuting them in the public space, in the public domain, I mean, regardless of the space or of the feeling of people, regardless of anything, why, instead of doing like that, why don't we create a design workshop where creative, along with the community, can rediscuss about the shape of the city, about how to use a public space, and about how events can only contribute to transform a city, even though they are temporary. So starting from 2016, we opened the school, and we started the school with a beta workshop, let's say like that. So with a prototype workshop where 15 creatives worked together for more or less 2 months, also designing the format of the school itself. So we had like a basis idea with some principles, not rules, but the first group of people working here at the school, they have decided, and indeed they have written the format of the school itself. So the school is located into a neighborhood of the city. It's a very peripheral area, but it's a nice story because indeed the premises of the school should have been in the city center for the European Capital of Culture, but indeed at the very last minute, the spaces were not ready for many reasons. So we decided to reuse and to reopen this space in a very peripheral area of the city that had been completely refurbished, like 4 years before, but never opened, never really used by anyone. And this place should have been a cultural center for the neighborhood. So it made a lot of sense to reopen the door and to transform this abandoned space into a powerful tool for the neighborhood itself, first of all, and for the city as a whole. So the first thing that we did when we arrived here was to construct the school, to build the school. So the space was empty. We didn't buy any table or chair or shelves. We self-built everything from scratch. Together with all these professionals that have been selected to work with them. The reason is that at the Open Design School, prototyping is a very crucial phase in the design process because we work within a process of trial and error. So someone of you, maybe Maxime, you have mentioned that there's not just one solution, but multiple solutions. And this kind of process, this reiteration of actions really can help you to learn a lot, also to amend the process and to find the best solution for you and for the community around yourself. So also in the refurbishment of the different places, we have moved the room around very, very frequently because daily we have understood which was the best scenario to work with. And also according to the number of external people coming that was growing day by day, we have decided to move the space and also all the furniture around to have the best solution for everybody. So the Open Design School is a design studio, but it's mainly a factory. So here at the school, we research a lot, but researches are oriented to produce and to provide tangible solutions. So it's not just research for the research's sake, but we are aimed to provide solutions to real problems and real challenges. Because here at the school, we do not design products, but we work on processes and open processes that can involve also the local community, because every time that we design a setup or an infrastructure for an event, indeed, we are modifying the city. We are changing the public space, even though it's a temporary change and it's not permanent. Indeed, we are providing a new scenario, a new possibility for the city. And so it's very important for us to involve the citizens in this kind of design process, because that way they can, participate to an overall improvement of the city itself. So we work on different topics. We have provided, set up for exhibitions, urban installations, also a lot of researches, but also, with a precise program of, let's say, educational meetings that have taken different form. First of all, we have decided to start with this project with a very huge research because our main duty, when we have opened the school, our main duty within the Foundation Matera 2019, who had to implement the cultural program, was to design infrastructure for the events, which seemed to be too much intangible. Because we didn't know exactly when we have opened, it was 2 years in advance before the European Capital of Culture year. So it was still not clear exactly which kind of events would have taken place or in which places. So before acting in the public domain, we have decided to make a huge mapping campaign of all the places that were suitable to host events. Also because here, Matera is a very small city in the south of Italy, so we don't have big cultural infrastructures. So no big theater, or concert hall, etc. So this seemed to be a very huge issue for all the city, because people continue to wonder, where will we host all these events if we don't we don't have the right places to host all these events. Indeed, in this way, we have started to map hundreds of places to rediscover them, and we did it with the citizens inhabiting the city and the region, thus redefining a totally different geography of the region itself. So we provided a very detailed technical sheet for each place, and also a gallery, a photographical gallery, so that also people from abroad or artists or whoever wanted to understand what we were doing, they could jump onto the website and also use the database that was and is still free available online. So providing all this information about the places also demonstrated that in a very small region, because the region, our region is more or less as Lithuania, I think, Jūratė, in terms of size, thus demonstrating that this is very small region, because it's really small. And Matera is neither like Kaunas. I mean, we don't have the benefits in a way of the Russian domination. We don't have example of the Bauhaus architecture. We don't have all these, kind of heritage. We have another kind of heritage, but that's demonstrating that indeed there are a lot of hidden spots in the city, and that indeed the European Capital of Culture could also be a way to rethink to the city itself. Thus, thinking to what Maxime was stating before about capital cities or small city that have to position themselves on a map or finding their identity, I think that you are right. Looking at yourself from a distance, maybe it's the best exercise or the first exercise to do to reconsider everything that you have. Of course, in this kind of approach, it has been very, very important to have also involved people coming from abroad. So not only local creative, so architects or carpenters or artisans or artists, writers, etc., but also having creatives coming from the rest of Italy and from abroad, because they have brought new perspectives and they have looked at our heritage with totally different eyes. So without any kind of prejudice. And so this has been very powerful for us to redesign completely a new, an endless, chances that we could put together. Moving from this huge mapping campaign, then we have started also to redefine some new routes to visit the city and to discover a new city. Matera is a UNESCO city. We are one of the most ancient cities in the world. So all the tourists that we have and all the people coming from outside, they come to visit the historical center, of course, because it's very beautiful and it's amazing. But indeed, the real city is not the historical center. I mean, the city is elsewhere, and also citizens as well. They are elsewhere. So the city is much more than a postcard. So by doing this kind of exercise, we have also identified 5 new routes that were to visit a new city or an hidden city, also considering these new routes and designing them with inhabitants, and also asking inhabitants to provide their stories on some spots that could not have, an aesthetical or an architectural value, but could be valuable in terms of social impact or for the history of the neighborhood itself or for the inhabitants, meaningful for the inhabitants. Then, as I told you, we have worked on exhibitions and and many other projects. So what is really meaningful is not, the final output, but why we did it. So this is the case. For instance, this is an archaeological museum nearby Matera, and we had to, deliver, to design, and to produce an exhibition around mathematics. Okay, so the director of the museum wanted to give us only the room on the right on the screen that you see, which was it was an abandoned room, very small, absolutely not functional, etc. While she didn't want to give us access to the rooms that you see on the left, because this is a very new wing of the museum, never used before, that she didn't want us to use because she wanted to be the first one to open it with a proper exhibition, etc. So this has been part of the process as well. So working with public institutions, asking them to change their approach, so opening up new possibilities for a wider community of creative people, also giving them the possibility to use a new space or new spaces in a different way. So the exhibition was made totally analogic, not digital, because we decided that indeed people should have touched all the installation, because it was a process of learning about mathematics, so playing with them. So it was a learning experience as well. Also, we have done a lot of urban installation also outside Matera, always work with the community that should have had this installation. For instance, this is a very beautiful place in Assisi. This is a church that is visited by thousands of pilgrims every day, but the space under the arches is not used. And the square doesn't have any spot where you can sit, or you can take a rest, or you can have a chat, or you can just read a book, etc. So we have redesigned the space with the possible users, especially kids that use this space as a playground from themselves, thus providing for a limited period of time, some infrastructures where people can gather and make something happen. So the valuable thing with these actions, even though are temporary, is that you suggest new possible scenarios. And somehow this kind of prototyping test, this kind of test, can really help you or public institution to decide, together with the citizens, together with the communities and the users, which might be the best solution or the final solution for the improvement of the public domain. Also, we have been worked with not only with the foundation, but also with other stakeholders, with artists and communities in a process of co-creation, where we have co-created not only the space, but also the artistic format. This was, for instance, a community opera, so a new lyric opera written with a community of elderly people, young people, and disabled people. So about inclusive design. We have, been working with the director, with the composer, with the singers, and all the people that had contributed to the birth of this new kind of artistic format, in order to shape the space and also make this tangible structure functional for the public. So we have been working with deaf people, and we have been working with wood, making providing vibrations to the wood while the music was playing, or with blind people, providing them with something that they could touch and use as an orientation, etc. Or for kids, so we have provided different kind of stools for kids, for elderly people, etc. This kind of attitude was the same that we used for this inclusive performance, working with disabled people, professional and non-professional dancers as well, and with the British, indeed, the design group, Disordinary Architecture, which is an inclusive design group because they have architects, artists, and also disabled artists inside. So designing the space, transforming a space that indeed is a gallery of a shopping mall in another peripheral area. So indeed not a space for a performance. So it's just a gallery, but transforming also the space. So again, giving to the citizens new perspectives on the city itself, and also putting together a very wide and varied community of people that really would have the willingness to participate to a creative experience. We have been working also with schools on gardening because our premises here, we have a huge garden here outside. So we also work with schools and with citizens that, with the inhabitants of the neighborhoods, so that they can really take care of this place because it's their house. We are guests here. I mean, we are just temporarily using this space that should become, and is indeed a cultural center where everybody is welcome to come and do any kind of activity. And in terms of learning, also we weekly organize like open talks and also open review. We invite external experts, external guests, and also we also organize community workshops where people can come here and learn or share knowledge and experience. In terms of design and architecture and transforming the city, we have been working also on the idea of temporary architecture and circulating architecture. So transforming indeed a car or a van into a floating entity that could, I mean, go around and activate a pop-up space, thus again providing a gathering point or a chance for transformation. And yes, the last thing that I want to share with you is that we have just been working on a performing art festival, just finished before the lockdown, because starting from Sunday, we are no more allowed to go to theater or cinemas anymore, unfortunately. And also in this case, we have been working, for instance, with the audience, so with the public, on a new way to communicate the restrictions imposed by the pandemic, transforming them into a new way of being not far, but close in a different way. So transforming this concept of distance into new rituals, indeed, that all together people can redefine and think of. So that's it. I think that I was quite long, maybe, but.
No, you're perfectly on time. Thank you, Rita. Thank you very much. As I see, there is only 2 minutes left before before promised end of our session. I still have one question for the audience, so maybe I will switch straight to, without commenting Rita's or reacting to Rita's presentation, sorry. But Gintaras is asking to Rama, thank you for the inspiring presentation. What would be your tip to overcome the tendency from the business to skip the research and go for the obvious solution?
Yeah, well, that's a big question, so I'll try and answer it in 30, 40 seconds. That is the biggest challenge. So that 4-stage diagram I showed on inclusive design, the biggest mistake most organizations, whether it's business or government, make is that they start in the center. So they miss the first 2 stages. So it's the difference of asking the question, how do we cross a river, and just jumping straight to let's design a hovercraft, whereas a bridge may be the answer, a swimming may be the answer, or maybe people don't need to cross the river. So the biggest tool that one of the biggest tools that I've used is to actually bring in the voice of people into your pitches, into your presentations. People can argue with me and say, yeah, whatever you're saying is wrong, but they can't argue with the validation from someone. So a quick example was we were working with a supermarket 15 years ago whose marketing manager said, we don't need to do any research. Older people love our packaging. So we took a selection of their packaging and asked 8 older people to open it. And they were only able to open 20%. And we've got this wonderful video of a German guy called Frank trying to open easy peel bacon packaging. And he takes 12 minutes. He doesn't give up. You know, he's got that kind of focus. And we just went back and our pitch to the board was just 12 minutes of Frank trying to open their packaging, nothing else. They told us nothing is wrong, but they couldn't argue with Frank. And 6 minutes, halfway through, they turned around and said, look, this is so painful to watch. We'll do a project with you. So persuade using any means possible that's legal and moral. But you may need to be a little bit forceful and a little creative and a little alternative. But get those first two, the first half in, show the real issue, show the real problems, show the real challenges from real people, not imagined scenarios.
Thank you, Rama, very much. And I'm so sorry that time just flew by so quickly. It would be so nice to talk to you or to all of you, even for a longer period of time. I hope this is not the last time we meet all together. We still work with, we already work, so to say, with Maxime in the modernism platform. We work with Rita on Deo's project, and as a Matera school, we are on the same ADD network of Design for All with Rama. I hope we will continue collaborating, all of you, and let's reshape our city. And if you will be part of that, I will be very grateful. I hope everybody will be very grateful. So let's share and co-create. Okay, so thank you once again and see you next time. Goodbye.
See you next time. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.